Are that was on the Kimdri Labja. And I Gunjusumia and it and Japsu Johnny, like Japsu George and Kimdri Labja Lagures. I love your love sitting with some to Stangore, Sumoroda, Chis and some Latana and Stangore Lamna, the Suzuki Gunjusumia, and it don't want to give you nobody, give me conscious of your, give me conscious of Gugres and Biggie, Yishe, then Suzuki, Yishe, then it can begin. So, love Yamlinje. The Nosuji Yamlinjeva Nashin, Shanlea, and Shan Zivi Tony, Shanlia, Shan Simjatam Dewa Dunga, Dewa Duba Dunga Mituba, Chipad, the inside, Condri Jamdru Yamlinje, Tarbioko, Togu, Samje, and Delia, Zawachi, and Delia, and Nuvika Jogi, and Yam, Jamdru Gormashi, Condolia, and Lucian Jamdru Edition. Tisan Jamdru Jeva and the parent the Yor said, all those in the Jamdru Jeju or Jamdru Jeju, then a Jamdru Lapjala Laviala, those in the Jawar Espa, those in the Shanley, Pemper to Gores, as she said. La Rani Gita Susaragi, and the Chibin Cheta Timbiki Jawa and the Shebina, Ya Jamdru Kujusumlea, Ichi Lotte Chebo, Pura, the Sodif Chibitone, on Dush, Duchin Yamin Jelagache, and the Jamdru Lapjan and Migavi on the Lagachi orders, Nima on the Sangetan Jig, Pavikas of Korongus, Yamakane, Panajilaga, or Dushin, Data Timbiki Lagachi orders, as she did, or Dushin. And then, and Jawa can Chevina, that Dushin, and Jammu Kunjusumia, Yichis Chevama, Jammu Kunjus, Yimba Cheva, and Ba Lushin and the Jig, Jammu Kunjusumia, Shen Bigeta, Jevatan Tawa. Meeting bigger, Loven Shalia, Danger, or conscious Lumping Kawa Jigga Mares, that in Tabania, Jammu conscious Luke or essay, or Dusine, Lapjet, Jawar Cousin, some of the nation Yaman Jawar essay than Dusine, Casan tissue.
Good morning. So we're continuing to look at the refuge trainings. So these trainings one needs to engage in once one has gone for refuge, because they have they serve the function of helping to both develop as well as stabilize, make firm our refuge. So one generates refuge first through cultivating the causes, through generating fear at the real possibility of falling into the lower realms, and more generally at continuing to suffer in cyclic existence. And then generating the second cause, that the three jewels, they have the capacity to guide me to attain a state of protection from such suffering. So these are the two initial causes for going for refuge, and they should be regenerated whenever one does go for refuge. Then add to that I am not alone in being in such danger. All beings want happiness and to be free of suffering, yet have the causes for suffering, immense number of causes for suffering on their continuum. Through my going for refuge, may this be a cause for all to go for refuge too, and thereby to be led to transform their minds and gain liberation from suffering. Through training in refuge and training in the Dharma in general, may I be an example to all and a guide for those who seek it. Moreover, as we saw last night in some of because we've concluded looking at the individual precepts, those relating to the three jewels separately. Now we look at the common precepts, those relating to the three jewels as a whole. And within these, we saw last night that before one engages in any activity, one should go for refuge, honoring and supplicating the three jewels. And this is how all the great bodhisattvas of the past and the present are practicing. And so we should follow their example. Moreover, due to developing deep, heartfelt faith in the three jewels, I must ensure that all that I do is in accordance with their teachings, and I don't engage in anything that is contrary to their teachings. We'll continue in the text, and we come to the outline in the middle, page 135, which is looking at the benefits of going for refuge. So of the 6 common precepts or trainings, this is the 5th.
On the pain Jelangavalas and yes, pain Jayores, and Naba Sanji per Tsuba, Domba Tamji Dino Jua, one sabe Lady Nam, Subjin Zebra Jua, Sunam Jachimbo Soba, Manjur Midunwa, Mida Mima in Bepachiki Mitsuba, Chisamba Tamji Juba, Muldo Sanja was.
So the published book, we're in the bottom of page 114 in the handout or the ebook, in the middle of page 135. Having understood its benefits, go for refuge 3 times a day and 3 times at night. So here now, Lama Tsongkhapa mentions the 8 benefits. Firstly, it is the measure of being a Buddhist. It is the basis of all vows. The karmic obscurations accumulated previously are reduced and exhausted. Fourthly, one accumulates vast merit. Fifthly, one does not fall into the lower realms. One is not harmed by human and non-human hindrances. One accomplishes everything one wishes for. And finally, one swiftly attains Buddhahood.
네, 남바 상기바 차교 말레스 제사다 남바 상기바 취바 제도다 수수 건조숨이야 접수 조제 겸로 여바 인자네 소소 남바 상기바 가사 차로 그래서 디나 취바세 디스모로와.
The first, it is the measure of being a Buddhist. This is because whether someone can count themselves amongst Buddhists or not depends whether on their continuum they have refuge. In other words, whether they sincerely turn to the 3 jewels for protecting refuge. This, having this mind is the measure of whether someone is a Buddhist or not.
조당 신디베 아니 겹르 제벌 잡베 겹르 톱라 만년발 톱라 마땅와라 자오스.
Let's turn then to the explanation of the first of the 8 benefits. It is a measure of being a Buddhist. Although, generally speaking, there appear to be many ways of positing what constitutes a Buddhist, and a non-Buddhist and a Buddhist, it is widely known that Atisha and Santipa differentiated them by their going for refuge.
가사디 귤에 겸로여나 얘네 가사데 나바리 가사디 귤라 군주스마 교수주에 겸로 직 매매나 나바 말에서야당 근데네 야지 저기 따와가다기 차게 시세죠래 뒤에 담지 미다와 사제 담지 동화와 최 담지 동신 담에바 냥알리티비 시화세지 디네기 시보디 켈링엔데다 나바상게 바래 디네 케멜레나 나바상게바 말에서 어두시네 근데 나바상게베 샤랑 예와 체단들이야 안지당 디네기 송다몽 우여래라다 지리 지나라 줘서 마도 낭사데.
Lama Tsongkhapa starts by saying, although generally speaking, there appear to be many ways of positing what constitutes a Buddhist, a non-Buddhist and a Buddhist. So to mention 2, there's the one that already mentioned, whether one has the mind of refuge on one's continuum or not. Or secondly, whether one has the views of Buddhists as presented in the 4 seals. And the 4 seals being all compounded phenomena are impermanent, all contaminated phenomena are subject to suffering, all phenomena are empty and selfless, and nirvana is peace. So some measure that whether someone's a Buddhist or not is whether one has these Buddhist views, if one has adopted these Buddhist views or not. But generally speaking, here what is being presented is whether one goes for refuge or not.
Adine za dusin yores mangwere inada nganzo karche gore lamna ane dusin jochi ge karsun bayrasin jochi da ane shendi ba khoran zuge karsun korsne namba sanki ba da ina mai sedi jamro jamre chebar tabe se konzo dusin jamre gone chigore se sonware se jamre gone jamre and jabar tabe se namba ina mai se jamre gone yome chigore se chebar chigore.
But the great Atisha and Tsongkhapa differentiated people as to whether they could be included with Buddhists or not, in dependence on whether they have gone for refuge or not.
Dine inzada, ane nganzo karishis nambasya di jamzhu topla manyan bala, topla matang wala jawos. Chesada, kunju suna gyabsu zhiwe jamzhu yueba che, jamzhu che, ane jamzhu di yuebi ki yuede batila che wores, nambar hes. Ta nyema kwa jamzhu che, dine yanchi kunju suna yi ma chibe jamzhu di pa tongwa ina kwa yaa namba chaga ma jamzhu yuemaris. Nyema tobi yorode kwa dada tangzi miyabatan, ko dangsa wares, chisa miyabares, di nangpa chagiri besen, nangpa chagiwa marwas, chisa deniki, da garishi yasene, jamru kunju suna, gyabsu zhuane, jamru gyula yuediken kansa, nga topden, deniki matangwa che yuedipe kansa dike da, o dela, nangpa re yasene, o tu shagore yasiri da.
Lama Tsongkhapa continues. Therefore, a Buddhist should be understood to be someone who has achieved going for refuge and has not given it up. So this then is referring to, in the present tense, that abiding on their continuum is the mind of refuge. It's not sufficient to have gone for refuge in the past and that has degenerated or been lost, but that one would need to have gone for refuge, and that mind of refuge needs to continue to abide on one's continuum. Then one is suitable to be included amongst Buddhists.
Nangba siddhir ngāng zhigida gōnchū sumla gyabsu zhūwe gyamzhō jine ngāng zhigida tuñbiki jesu zhāngan dila nangba la korwa da ngāng zhigida nāng sēdi chida nāng sēdi rāng dāng ngāng zhūna ngāng zhigida shen sērwa da rāngi tuñbiki jesu zhāngan dila gyabsu zhūwe gyamzhō yutinga dila nangba si korwa zi nāng sēdi jibi ngāng zhigida kāngpe nāng lo da chilo si ki xie yorwa. 나나 치세디 낭바라의 낭세의 랑기 뜸바 나라주 겹수저의 뜸바 상이 점내니로와 디 지수장지 안 지수장지 디 권수스마 겹로 유지겐들라 낭바라 그러바다 대단 나라주의 신 코로나지 현대기 뜸바기 지수장에 안 좋은데래 치바라 그러바 지수장이 지선 치다 낭세디 치 낭바세디 저수 랑기 뜸바당 아니 치바시도 랑레 현비기 dōmbā dīshī sūrāṅ chīnāṅ sēdi ōdē chīdā nāṅ sē chīsāṅ dēnī kī rāṅgī dōmbē jī sūrāṅ chī dēli yā rāṅgī dōmbā lī yā anē gōnchō dēli yā gōnchō shā dēli yā nī dēbā yīchē dā dēbā jī dō chē chē an chōhān dēlā dā dī kiam nē kē līn chē an dēli yā yīchē dā dēbā jī dō chōhān dēlā dā nāṅ bā sī kruwa dā dā hān zū jī ngā zū lē shēn bī kī yāng jī kiam nē hōrāṅ zō shēn kiam nē shēn dā 공주기 겹려야 다지게 대바지 지시지 될 대바 지시지네 조한 지수랑은 될래 지바지 그러다 지바다 능바세야 돼 내내게 시거로다.
Therefore, as we see here, Buddhists go for refuge to the three jewels. So the actual word for that's translated as Buddhist literally is insider, and the word that's translated as non-Buddhist is outsider. So we should understand as the term for Buddhist, insider, being that one goes for refuge to one's own guide, someone who leads us to liberation. We don't go to refuge to some other guide of a different group apart from our own. Whereas if we were to go to refuge to a set of teachings and their teacher and a community other than those of the three jewels, we would be going for refuge if we were to go for refuge with trust to such a group, they would be outside of the Buddhist fold. And therefore, one would not be considered a Buddhist, but outside of the Buddhist fold. So therefore, a general way to understand this term insight insider, which is the word for Buddhist, is one is inside the fold of Buddhists, in that one has gone for refuge to one's own founder teacher, his teachings and community.
Then Rangle Shenbi kept that kept the law to kept Shangi just around to Handela and Anzuki kept Nalo the Chilo as Google.
I'm explaining this so that it's very clear that this differentiation between insider and outsider is not one of superiority and inferiority, but it's rather making clear that one, as a Buddhist, is going for refuge within one's own group and not going for refuge outside of one's own group. Group being to our founder teacher, his teachings and his community, and not going for refuge with a mind of faith to a different founder teacher, their teachings and community. So this isn't a differentiation in terms of superiority and inferiority. Our religion is superior, others are inferior. But it's rather, for example, you are part of your own particular family, your own birth family, or your own family. And this is a family you are within. You may be close with other families or know other families, but they are apart from or outside of your family. You are not within those families, but within this family. So therefore, we should understand that this term insider refers to going for refuge within the group of the three jewels. And that meeting be bola so bala and number them in the middle was the Jeza when you do bala so bala, Delia, Consuya, Capsule Dorje, Digi, Tele, Capsule John John together, and now about a chiba as small sugar, Jabber. Where we use these terms insider and outsider in society is as Australians, you are within the group of Australians. Someone who comes here from another country is an outsider to this group. Likewise, from the perspective then of Australians, looking at New Zealanders, they are outsiders to the Australian group. New Zealanders in New Zealand would have a different perspective. They'd say, no, we're the insiders. You Aussies, you are the outsiders. So this is the way the term should be understood. Again, I just want to emphasize, it's not one of being better or worse, or superior and inferior, but it's an insider is someone who's gone for refuge to the three Buddhist jewels. And like we saw yesterday, if one goes to refuge to, for example, the Burn tradition, with their founder teacher and teachings and community, then if one goes for refuge there, one is an outsider to the Buddhist community. One is then no longer within the Buddhist community, but outside of the Buddhist community. So this then is the meaning of the term insider and outsider. That being said, though, if one were to speak to a burn practitioner, they would not accept that they're not Buddhists. They certainly say they are Buddhists. But this, in reference to the burn, so this is more of a modern phenomenon that they prefer to or insist on being called Buddhists. Anyway, in terms of whether someone is an insider or an outsider, as the great Atisha and Tsongkhapa said, one is an insider if one is within the community of Buddhists, where one goes for protecting refuge in a heartfelt way to the three jewels of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And if one goes for refuge outside to a teacher and teachings and community outside of the Buddhist fold, one then would be considered an outsider or a non-Buddhist.
Dena Sangyebar Tsubala Kunjo Sumla Ning Taba Ne Dunba La Sober Zimba Guiki Demena Gewa Kanje Yan Sangyebar Mitsudo.
Lama Tsongkhapa continues. Hence, as a standard for being a Buddhist, one must consider the three jewels to be one's teacher and so forth from the depths of one's heart. Without that, even though you do virtuous deeds, you will not be included among Buddhists.
Dena Sili Gumzen Dene Nasi or Ben Namba Sangyebar Sayading on the Gemne Kunjo Sumlia, Gemne Yanto de Ken Della Japsu Tribi, Gemro, Yueva Della Namba, the Dimena Namba Maimba, Gumzen Dene Hina, and then as a Karchi Horsene, Sangyebar Tubalas, Namba Sangyebar Chabala, and the Kunjo Sumla Ning Tapa, near Sim Dinian, Dumbala, Dumba Sanyu Jimne Delia, Jep Dumbapo, said Dumbalos, Jep Dumbaba, Gedun Kunjodi, and then Jep Tubia, Daro, Chu Kunjodi, Jep Mue, say, Sempike, Deniki, Kunjo Sumla Ning Tapane, Dumbalos of Zimba Quiki, Deniki, Sempe Samla de Gogores, and Gogores.
The first word, hence, and this is a connecting term from what followed before. So we're building on what was presented before. As a standard for being a Buddhist, one must consider the three jewels to be one's teacher and so forth. The three jewels to be one's teacher. So this refers to teacher will be the founder teacher, Buddha Shakyamuni, as the initial illuminator of the path to enlightenment. And this path that to be cultivated within, that is the actual refuge, the Dharma jewel. There are true paths and true cessations. And then thirdly, that the Sangha jewel, those great Arya practitioners, they are one's companions on the path. So one should have heartfelt refuge from the depths of one's heart. One should have deep and abiding faith and trust in the three jewels.
Denisi Meba, none the Gewa Kanje, Sangyebar, Mitsu, the Gewa Cheva Zambi, Nava Sangyebar, Chagur, Petsin, Chagma, as or Dangele.
As Lama Tsongkhapa concludes, even if one lacks that sincere faith, whilst one may accumulate virtue, one could not be said that one is accumulating virtue as a Buddhist. One would not be within the Buddhist fold.
Sangye chumden de ya sangye de gyap tyen bo bore sa de da gyap tyen ka nga zu ge dungan se dan di yu bi tablam di da sangye chumden de ma dengires je za da mano wa da ane chi ge mano wa cha sang den hu re dengires de den bi nu ba ya sangye ya re se di khelen che de da sangye chumden de ya an gyap tyen bo bo jin ba se che gyap tyen ba jin ba 당 저게 상기 좀 내는 게 손셰비게 최대를 양아 저게 냠는 제발라 될이야 로치긴디 개념 거쪽에 제기래 제투의 그 뉴바 코랑 안에 되는게 냠는 제제 냠용규를 유래 봐서 먼저야 아니 그 로체야 뉴바 요래 로틴데 제기래 선배다 이시시에다 개념 거쪽에 겹주베 다로도 좀 봐서 나한테 상기 손셰비 뜸부 손셰비 될 양아 저 냠는 제 개념 거쪽에 로치된 저게 냠는 제제 냠제도 님이 알아주길래 최권조사데 고대 날람디네 끼그레세 끼그레 기토그레 제자 니 토바지긴 셈백이다 삼다야디 데네게다 고대나 냠는 제제데 데네 알아주길라 아니 양디에서야디 토요디 나 코르동아 타달을 저거래 세계 다 이시시네 이시디 데네게 삼다다 저거래 세베다 타제야디라 안 데인자다 최고조대 겹무리 세대 진바디스 겹무스 진바세 최고다 어두시네 아주 겹군주 군주술은 닌타반에 덤발로서 봐 진바소 괴기세 어두시네 삼 당국을 해서 그러다.
So the direct or manifest way to go for refuge is to go for refuge with an understanding of what the three jewels are, understanding that the Buddha Shakyamuni is our founder teacher, who was the person who initially illuminated the complete and unmistaken path by which suffering beings will gain liberation, complete liberation from suffering. So having deep and abiding faith in the Buddha jewel is going for refuge to the first of the three jewels. Then the Sangha jewel, understanding that these are the advanced practitioners who have gained liberation from suffering. And they are our companions. They accompany us and guide us. So having deep and abiding faith in these practitioners who have gained unshakable experience of the Dharma as our refuge, that is going for refuge to the Sangha jewel. And then the Dharma jewel, understanding that this is the actual refuge, whereas the Buddha jewel is the founder teacher, the Sangha jewel are our companions, understanding that the Dharma jewel is our actual refuge. Therefore, we have a determination to attain the Dharma jewel within, or to cultivate the Dharma jewel within. In other words, to cultivate true paths and true cessations, and cultivate them to the extent where we gain complete liberation from suffering, where we gain nirvana. So having at least an aspiration, if not a determination, to cultivate the Dharma jewel within, this then cultivates going for refuge to the Dharma jewel.
나리네 디레다 난 도마 탐지기 띵도 교화 세대다 난 주기 점도 여바이나 난 점도 디겐 데라 띵네 안 주기 도마 탐지기 띵도 교고레스 띵여 가서네 난 데라 띵네 안 주기 지게 도마레 맞춰서 당보 점도 고고로와 디네자다 점도 여바이네 도마 탐지기 띵도 교고레 세대 다 도마 탐지기 계획이 시절 마서나 다 점도 디레스지.
That was the first of the 8 benefits. The second is it being, refuge being the basis of all vows. In that, before one can receive any of the vows from the Buddha, one needs to have refuge in one's continuum. The Treasury of Abhidharma Auto-Commentary says, those who go for refuge gain access to taking all the vows correctly.
Isanda Korgubas in the Kambanala, Zuvala, Gonalia, Gochikuwa, Denian, Chictu, in the Kambanalia, Ningo Susukoya, Shazaratu, Dina Jedam and Zugim. Domba Geta Maki said, and when Yelia Jambuku, she's not just to Namni, Domba Yanda Balama, Tamjelo, Gorguba, Indos, and One, and Zuki to Balembayna, and what conjunction just to do Jamroche, the Niki to Balayana. The name Rabjunga Dombalembayna, and what conjunction just to do Jamroche, the Niki, Rabjunga Dombalea, and the main big down, changes and Bata, Sangai to Bakalim Bayna, and Zugida, Delia, Tambo, Jamroche, the name Jamroche Savage, Dombalingo, she's an Indian Zada, Japsu to what Jamrodi, Dombayanda Palama, Tamji, Gorgubari, she did a corner, she research.
Those who go for refuge gain access. So understand gaining access like entering through the doorway into a building. So the doorway is the entrance or the access point to enter the building. So too with receiving vows of the Buddha. Whether they are lay vows or the vows of the ordained, one needs to first have a sincere refuge in the three jewels. So too the vows of a bodhisattva, the vows of a secret mantra, one first requires the mind of refuge.
Genyen sumla gyabdwa dini domye tsawa yin she songde esa nyangde ki samba tembra chechen dele domba gyawala konsos.
Then a further quotation. And 70 verses on going for refuge also says, Upasakas go for refuge to the three, that is the root of the 8 vows. This means that by going for refuge, the thought of passing beyond suffering is stabilized, which gives rise to the vows.
This was King Sumna Jabrosa King said, King Kari Tubena, King Tubena, and Deneki, King to Palatambo, Conjusumna Japsu, Jambricone, and Jambric, any king to Gore such. King Sumna Jabdroa. King Sumna Jabdroa said, King Sumna Jabdroa said, King Tomba Lembala, Tambo Conjusumlia, Japsu, Jambroje, the Doma King Tomba Lengo, King Sumna Jabdroa said, King Tomba Trubala, Lembala, Tambo Conjusumna Japsu, such.
Upasakas or lay vow holders or those who are seeking virtue, they go for refuge to the three. So in other words, before one receives lay vows, one goes for refuge to the 3 jewels. And this is also the case for the ordained. Before receiving vows of ordination, one also goes for refuge to the 3 jewels.
Deni said, Conjusum, just to Jamdo Dini, so Jamdo Dini, and the Domye Zawa is, Dombaki Zawa is, Dombaki Tavala, and the Zawa Jamdo Dini, Yungo said, Cesar Dombaki, the Kimbuto Choye, the Domba Sumda, and the Rabjun Chogi, and Domba Machine, Dombaki, Society Dombaki, said this word. Cesar Denigi, Society Dombaki, Lembala, Dambo, one Conjusum, Japsu Troche, and the Dusling over the
It's for this reason, then, that refuge is the root of the 8 vows. So the 8 vows refers to the 3 different sets of lay practitioners, and the 5 different sets, or 3 different sets of lay practitioners and 5 different sets of ordained practitioners. So these make the 8. And before receiving any of the sets of vows, it is a requirement that refuge is taken, or rather refuge abides on the continuum of the individual.
Gonjosumna Japsudribe, Yin Dobade, and then Sodatomba Zawari, Saji, Goyagi, Yangadua, the Tikoranda, some Namen. Gonjosumna Japsudri, Yin Sumna Japsu Japdroa said, Yin Doba, Gonjosum Japsudribe, Yin Dobade, and then Dombaki Zawari, Saji, Goyagi, Yangadua, and Dimare, Yin Dobadi, Dombaki Zawari, Lago Mare, Yin La Sobig, Gonjosumna Japsudribe, Jambrodi, and then Sosabi Dombaki Zawares. Zadi Jamsu, Sosabi Dombaki, Lemba, Natambo, Gonjosumna Japsudribe, Jambriki Chewores.
So I wanted to be clear, as a translator, I think our English is clear, that when it says in our first line, Upasakas go for refuge to the three, that this should be very clear, that the three refers to the three jewels. So it is the three jewels, now the second line, that is the root of the 8 vows. There shouldn't be a misunderstanding that the root is the vows of individual liberation, which are part of the vow, which are the vows that Upasakas take. So the vows of individual liberation are not the root. Rather, the root is going for refuge.
Isn't Dombies Suso Tarbike, Dombaki said, Kimbi Chone, Dombo Sumure, Digarisne, Guinea de la Guinea Pada Maniche, Dine, Yene Dombashi, Triji Dombashi, Churwa, and the Yene Domba, Disum de la, and the Kimbi Domba Sum Sumore.
In the final 2 words, 8 vows, this refers to 8 different sets of practitioners and vows that form part of the vows of individual liberation. And these are divided into 3 for lay practitioners and 5 for ordained practitioners. So the 3 for the non-ordained are the vows taken by women, vows taken by men, and one-day vows. Those are the 3 sets.
Anne Gelon de la Gelon Pata Mas, Yong or Gelon Pama Nije, then Gesu Pama Nier, Gesu Pata Mas, and Nije Shisha Yongro. Then the name Gesu Dupsane, Geloma Maduel, Paradilia, the Geloma Tusa Maris, Chedachi, Chedel Niela, Korea, Nea Geloma, said Tombachinje, the Nigi Gesulipa, the Stoache, then Geloma, Duvio Mar, the Geloma Tomba. Malade, and the Niki, Geloma Session, Dichipet and Nachayo, Chesandinza, and Kimbi Rapchin Sugar Tombatella, Gelon Pamaniche, and the Gesu Pamani Shije, Digala Geloma, said Nemacharu, Modus and Nachago, and the Rapchin Raptuchuinza, Rapchin Sugar Tomba, so take Tombangadis. Chesadine, the Dingadiche, Kimbi Sugar Tombo, Sum Chigere, Getele, Sosatepe Tomba, yes, that the Tom yes, said this morning.
So therefore, 3 of the divisions relate to the non-ordained, leaving 5 for the ordained. And the 5 for ordained then refer to male and female fully ordained monks and nuns, male and female novice monks and nuns. And then there's the 5th is probationary nuns. So this is a period of a set of vows taken between a novice and fully ordained nun. So then these are the 5 groupings for the ordained.
Gabriel, Teaching Surgeon, Teaching Surgeon, Teaching Surgeon, Domba Shuba said, I am Jamdro, Jig Domba Shubas, Jamdro Domba, Teaching Surgeon Domba said, and the name, Tick Beja Tayakashi, Dai Ungor, Kashi Tangu, Tanganju, Beja, Jamdru Domba said, Kasore, Jamdru Domba said, the name Teaching Surgeon Domba said, Beja Tango, Jamdru, Jamdru Java, and Teaching Surgeon Lemba said, Domba Shua said, Beja Tango, Jamdru Lem, Jamdru Java said, Jamdru Java, Jamdru Domba Shu, Jamdru Domba said, she go mare. Tis Teaching Surgeon Lemba said, Mado, Teaching Surgeon Domba Shuba, like go mare.
In general discourse, one may talk about the vows of the 8 Mahayana precepts or the vows of refuge. So this isn't terminology we generally use. Rather, one talks about in these contexts, one doesn't generally talk about vows. Also, the texts don't use the term vows, although in general conversation, the word vow may be used. But the text in the context of the 8 Mahayana precepts and refuge vows, in those two contexts, the word vow is not used.
너도 시에송디에 다 제르미치기 대시기 다데 겸르 둔주베 치티에 제시에 가르는 거라서는 겹주에서 냐디게 삼바 템퍼를 제지 델레 domba께와라 공소스.
And Lama Tsongkhapa concludes by writing, I'll just add a little bit to this, or a sentence to this. This means that by going for refuge, the thought of passing beyond suffering is stabilized, which gives rise to the vows. This is the intended meaning of these passages.
제가 겸주에 냐디게 삼바 템퍼를 제시되다 나중에 겸주 제지도 고외 동화 다달에 탈고도 딜레 껴비 니바디 술요를 겹네 건조스도 요래 선배게 삼바지에도 당한조 고외 동화를 탈비게 탈바세 토부 우두사 디네게 탈바 토비게 삼바디 템버치고래 제래 템버치고래스 제가 디네 템버친 디네 딜레 껴비 니바 겹네 건조스도 요래 삼 겸르지네 안 델레디네야 도마기 dombaşuyadı azıcık dombadushi şugores dombadikigores dine zada dela gongso sedi ginyosumla gyadova dine domge zawa yinseji ceza gemrodus kevala dine an dombaditus lingores dela gone sungores danda dire sungor.
The meaning of this is that before one receives the vows of the upasaka, the lay vows, one is guided to generate a wish to gain freedom from suffering, and then guided to recognize that it is the 3 jewels who have the capacity to guide us to gain actual protecting refuge. Then, with heartfelt trust in the 3 jewels, one then is ready to make the vows of the non-ordained, or the vows of the upasaka.
And then 난 점로 냠는 제 접수 냠는 제 되게 디바다 봐야 되더라. 랍듀소사 접주의 디바다 버튼비 가서 인디를 파게 도주 배자오 시 송배 파도 깨어를 규비게 테이브 접주집에 내를 맞게 봤다고.
Then coming to the third benefit, the karmic obstructions accumulated previously are reduced and exhausted. In the context of showing that bad actions are purified by going for refuge, the compendium of training says, here one must present the edifying story of the pig as an illustration. And then a god who was about to be reborn as a pig, by going for refuge, was not born as one.
제사당 건조기 점로 제제 점로 제바 내가 디바사비 디바디게 다루고래 디바다그리 해송으로와 제사 내내게 점로제 점로게 점로 제바이나 디바다그리 해서 제사 랍듀소 디가라송이데 랍듀나로 송유레서 내내 점로 디바다버 된바스 제사 니 다르에서 제사다 건조스나 점에 야다도 케일은 때라 이치 제지도 제네 두스 점로 제바이나 건조기 냐마 디바사제바 디바티게 다기리 에세고래 디자 랍디스나도 송요레 에세 랍디소 아니 겹르 디바타버 송 다바 다기요레세 디네 송요도 가라 랍디고 나라 베가라 송요라스네 아니 파게 도주기 베지 송요레 에세.
The third benefit then of going for refuge is that when one goes for refuge with deep and heartfelt faith in the 3 jewels, this serves to purify negative karma. And here the compendium of training mentions a story that can be mentioned.
안다 파게 도주에 가르 송말은 시에송베 안다 파도 깨워를 기베 레이부 잡르치베 데르마게 왔다고 오스데 별마소나 제자 다 숨자 숨리야 하지게 곧바 직다 하디게리야 마시니엘이야 다루 흉아요레서 지리포 치에게 다 제사 메도나 메도 닝보라차 메도데게 다 타일이야 사지게 장마 메도 지우주 소수 수볼이야 제데게 做没的张嘛修恰有了，就在那上那个内部什么叫什么太几里啊，太几个那些给检查不了的，可能给企业给打杀不了的，可能给原先没多的也人把它加，那说是个数这个数不的那就是人嘛开了的，那张嘛叫他现在的个如果这个用过嘛的就或者了，我做过对没过加了做过了像技术或怎么可是用过嘛的，那些的话被这个。但那个起点跑到他的里，东岸修理个的是，别东岸全部修，但没几个刚刚修过的是。这张起点跑的，那可能给工作人员也个我些有了，但顶一阵，好像是顶一阵专门我些去当，但顶一阵专门我把几万我们连个我些谁用过了，这张他底下了可能是连个我些用过的些，现在天天在可能跟我些大样的，给我起码的了，跑起来几个月把通下来似的，可能我些给通起来，他的给我起跑几个的。他跑把些的被啥打包有啥到做包有啥那看了的就做包啥的去用过了的，就是给我起码的那些给我同意的啊，那可别这个俺们这些呢，他的那些别啥身边这东西修就用对吧这些的。连用一些。慢慢的，这菜地就是么叫。可能连就往个菜地里说，可能连就往我是解药的，顶一阵做好些，但我是解药的些，那菜地里可能有的我是有的，就是我是给我起码跑几个月把通过了吧，给我嘛顶一阵做，但对连我是解的，对嘛的，顶一阵做过嘛，是新的做过嘛，连就往我是解药的，我是的是吧。
So this is an account of a god who, like gods do, was aware of their approaching death. Because beings in the god realms, they live in a life of great opulence, a life of great comfort. But when their death comes, their situation changes radically, and therefore the signs of their impending death are manifestly clear to them, as well as to those in their communities. Their flower garlands, the gardens surrounding their homes, these wilt and die. Their body smells for the first time. And therefore, because these signs are recognized, the friends of the gods keep their distance as well. Because for the first time, or this is really the only time that there are unpleasant smells and sights in the god realms. So the other gods rather stay away from their friend because of this unpleasant appearance. So this just adds to the immense mental suffering that gods experience as their life draws to an end. Moreover, gods have a clairvoyance. So it's called a karmic clairvoyance. So it's not a clairvoyance that comes from developing concentration, but it's one from imprints. So karmic clairvoyance. And with this, they can tell what their impending rebirth will be. So this particular god saw that they were not only falling from the god realms, but falling into the animal realm, and to be reborn as a pig and living in a filthy environment, eating swill and garbage. So this was the recognition that this god had, which just compounded their mental suffering.
Geshe ne pombo de kono Geshe se joro kono zo pombo la pombo joro wa le won bo Geshe so da sumji sa sum de kono zo ge hana ne ga zo ge Lama zo ro ko ji pombo joro ya Geshe se go wa je san di ge da tong ro wa mi ji gewa jemba ma re la di gewa jemba ji ma zo lumbo re pombo re joro wa di na sin da ge won bo Geshe na changba da wang shu se mo go ro wa on di na sin da sum ja sum gi kono zo ge pombo ma son li won bo Geshe se chi re se je san khui ge tong chin da mi de la de ya an ning je da ko kar che me ko le ya du ki chi ti ba re
So there's a God who is facing his impending death was in the heaven of the 33. And there is, within this heaven, there is a God who is the leader of the gods. And he saw that this dying God was particularly distraught. So he approached him and the dying God explained his predicament, explained this birth that was awaiting him.
Japsu Dogor, Jamdu Chegores, Dakoran Jamdu Che, Kunjosum Sem Dingi Pi, Jamdu Cheji Pi, Kunjosum, Japsu Dorje, Jamdu Cheji, Jamdu Gomche Delia, and Sangila Soa de Gores, Denina, Huron Dusene, Tablam Dide Marchen, Tapshika Omares, and Corona Dus Lavares.
In desperation, this dying God turned to the leader who had approached him, explaining what was happening, and compassion arose within the leader of the gods, who gave the following advice. There is only one solution, and that is if you can generate deep and heartfelt faith in the three jewels and go for refuge in a sincere manner, that can help. That and that alone can help.
On the name that I could do some like that, the nigga that gene, Nasola Gage, Papa Gate, Sem Shena, shoot Delia, Tawkin Mevanza, Digi that, Chiconjos on the best, Sim Dingy, Patamro shoe, Jesse Cambronia, Camroche, the niggy, Camro Comje, Tushe, Digi, and the niggy Camrocheva, Digi, Cotipa Tashe. Gewachimang, so Papa Gag, Diva the Dason, says a game watch that way, Camdo, Cheva, the Camdo Digi, Sonum Sachin, and then go Gewachima Kawaki Resine, guidance, and you guidance the Geva.
And then there's dying God. Recognize that there is an impending death, a birth for them in the lower realms, as a pig in the animal realms. Fear of such a rebirth was very real for them. So fear being the first cause of going for refuge, it wasn't merely theoretical, but now they knew this is what's awaiting me, and therefore this being was able to go for refuge with heartfelt faith. And thus, the power of this sincere faith was sufficient to purify that karmic imprint, and through that merit, led to them being reborn in the God realm of Tushita. So this is the reason why this edifying story of the pig should be used as an illustration, because it illustrates how going for refuge sincerely purifies past accumulated non-virtue. And then Lama Tsongkhapa continues with a quotation from the same text. Okay. Those who have gone for refuge to the Buddha will not go to the lower rebirths. They give up their human body and obtain that of a god.
And dele mi ten mi lu ya bang ya le dele la ba le lu top to re sa to boss ji sa da de ni ge gang da sang ye jap song wa se de sang ji ngo su den bi ge di shu la sang ye da chue dan ge dun sum la jap song wa se ko go re je.
So this quotation just serves as a basis for what has already been presented, which is that those who go for refuge to the Buddha will not fall to the lower realms, but rather they will, upon dying, will obtain an even better rebirth as a god. And then Lama Tsongkhapa writes something similar is stated regarding the Dharma and the Sangha.
That dusine dipa tabiki jamru china dipa tagriesa. That jamru chebane sunam baba me va sagriesa chumorda. 집안이 82발레스 겹송 쇠놈 수치나 감숨디야 뇌도 중스 계속치 뭐 주의대를 풀기샤와 갈라니 셰송바다로스.
Then the fourth benefit of going for refuge. One accumulates vast merit. The compendium of the perfection says, if the merit of having gone for refuge took shape, even these 3 realms would be too small a container. The water in the great oceans can never be measured in handfuls.
제사당한테 군주숨나 겹수주비게 겸로치여도 나 쇠남로치면서 내가 쇠남사에 죽주비나 때 지금 망고 쉬우쉬어레스 제사다 데니 감숨디야 뇌도 중세된 간주게 수카 되감도 수감 숨에 감서 숨지외네 먼저 겹수 소비게 쇠남이 죽주비나 도도 지여베나 되베 감라 샤나 슝 말에 아니 수감다 숨에 감숨갈 봐 샤베네 마숑와 딜레 마지어레세.
As it says in the first 2 lines, if going for a refuge sincerely, that if that merit that results from that were to take form, then that form of that merit couldn't fit into the 3 realms of the desire, form, and formless realms. That is the immensity of the merit accumulated through going for sincere refuge.
semgiden yorma도 숙도로라죠 요대요 바로 제가 먼저 계속성 위에 선남 제딩한테 미 통해요 말에 제가 당은 저기 숙도없이 내가 걸 먹고도 거기 겸로 있으면 신부도 있어요. 걸로 뉴유마도 면지 야와지 두고로 와 제가디 통해 매반자 나 저기 semgiden 샤와도 미기 통해 매 숙매 말에 숙매에서 통해 매 말에 이제 되니까 계속성 위에 선남지 숙도없이다 되네게 먹고 줘야래 해서지 제가 데니게스 다 쇠남데 catch 모시고요. 인장아서 통통고 말에 안저 통통하게 숙조부친데 데니게 감숨을 나라 샤샤바네 모셔야게 망부셔래서 catch 모시고래서.
Merit or virtue does not exist in the world as material form. If it did, that of just going for refuge would be of the immensity as presented here. Rather, the place that merit abides is on our continuum and therefore is unseen.
제가 제수 전부 주의대 부의샤바가 안에서 부의세에 되는 게 충주를 되게 충주지어래. 제가 되게 계속이 추가지도선 도스는 파 진은 주의 장기업 파 장기업나 도시변 곧 지투야 하요 말해서 다 되는 게 투야 하요 말을 계속해야 돼. 맞지 계신 뭐인자 되는 부의 충주지게 도스파 주의제 파 장기업네 파 되는 게 샤르스는 파 세로 제바나 되는 게 많이 세집은 세 지투야 하요 말해서 비디나 신아 저기 겹수주 쇠남디 파 세로 제바나 되는 게 아주 도시네 세 디짐디 디마도 민도세야 파 야와 치투야 깔래 하보래 해서 저는 백야체 모래서.
And the third and fourth line, the water in the great oceans can never be measured in handfuls. So in the same way that if one was wondering how much water is there in the ocean, and one tried to calculate it by taking handfuls of water and counting these handfuls of water, that would be impossible. One would be unable to empty the water, empty the oceans, and thereby count the number of handfuls of water in the oceans. So in the same way, one cannot even conceive of the immensity of merit that is accumulated for going for refuge.
나 디네 ngabase디 판유시네 인내숨 첸내숨 겹수 좋아 세치숨으로 제상 nga바네 ngame 셰바라 자오 세디니엘이 양아주야 네 권주숨나 겹수 좋아들래 아직 겹수 좋다가 첸내숨 인내숨 겹수 좋아그랬으면 셰생예마 셰사와리 니게 하고 그래서지로.
That final sentence, this is how vast it is in the Tibetan. So then moving to the fifth of the 8 benefits. One does not fall into the lower rebirths. You should understand this from above. So this is something we looked at a couple of verses before, that through going for refuge, one purifies such that in one's next rebirth, one will not fall to the lower realms.
권주숨 소감 세계치 하면 동 송고래 사디 주바디 다는 지금 ngolaware sindinyelia manzu chike shusare di sigorada manzu konjusumlia di penshede ani ya konjusumna shege sura de kasore lue kewa ma lu me kawa chi kyo mare se de ta zemo ge sura an konjusumna yi che me kyap su tu yi che yo mare de zemo zene sim dingi yi che de me malam na zemo re je o danga ji zemo je na joro wa zemo je na so so ge gemlo ya ge da din je a nga konjusumna yi che me se sim dingi ho ra yi che yo ba ina ya kan de ba da nga konjusumna yi che me se zemo je ne la gyo mare se ji singan ju jiro wa da je san gemlo jap su tu be du chi kyo mare se and this yore ko la wo se.
The sixth benefit, one is not harmed by human and non-human hindrances. Lama Tsongkhapa writes, this is easy to understand. This was then covered earlier when it was presented how one should not only go for heartfelt refuge, but one should not give it up at any price, and not even do so as a joke.
이시체 대바치 얼마다 다다가 시설다 내시는 다가 건주성의 켈린지 메시베 내내 삼단교 말레스 안 되네 어두시네 아저게 그지 건주성 소치야 안 건주성 메동와 송고그래 안 건주성이야 내시 제모지 개명로에 된다래야 안 건주성 켈린이 요 말레스 내내시 요 말레스 내게 대수 라비아디 파 송고그래 사실 그지 쉬로와데 지상 거래라 사디로와.
This relates to what we looked at last time, which was that one's faith in the three jewels, we should guard this mind of refuge, as we do our own life. And we should ensure that it stays solid or firm within us as we move through our life. In particular, when the ending of our life comes, we shouldn't allow the wrong view to come, that at the end of our life, that we give up our refuge. This would be a grave error. In fact, we should guard it so firmly that we should never even joke about giving up one's refuge. The seventh benefit, whatever Dharma activity you engage in, if at the beginning you make offerings to the three jewels, go for refuge and supplicate them, it will be easily accomplished. So here we are being advised that before engaging in any virtuous activity, first start by going for heartfelt refuge, together with honoring the three jewels through making offerings, as well as making supplications to them. And if one starts one's virtuous activities like this, they'll be quickly accomplished.
Pembertuya, Shanley, Pandore, Shanley, Chushiala, Shan, and Shanley, Pandor, Shangi, Dongas, and Digituya, Shanley, Pandoruyaki, Lega, Chena, Chunadin Belega. And Shan, and the Chigi, Shanley, Chushi, Consulia, and the Chigi, Somana, Juvan, and Jamro Chisuana, Jamni, Comjuya, with Niki, Consulia, Dushin, Petu Chavena, Chudatin be shooting a Java Chagorwa. Dinashi, Susugi, ya. Cha Sawadang, Chebuala Sobata. That's also a comjaki, Diniki, Gawaka Jubine, that is a shooting, Shudatin Bejawar was a Jamnijo Combiare, Dajinia Combiare, Nobanio Combiare, Ondu said yes, Lamrim combat is just shooting a Java Chagorwa. Chisa Deniza, Deniki Java Cheval Nielia, and the Conjusumlia, and the Chick Chebuana. So you conjust that delegate, Rodi, Gemini Conjus, Jigrisimbe, Gemini Conjus of the Isheda. And Delia and the Conjusum so dipche, and Dusin so dipche, and the Chua so dipche, and Dusin so dipche, and the answer Java Legache or then the Legache and the Java de and Duschevan 량에 된다디 주 대라도 주부리에서 요구 주투그래 사송으로
Whatever beneficial activities one engages in, whether it's formal beneficial activities such as teaching the Dharma or meditating on love and compassion, or just general activities in the day, it's imperative that one does them within the fold or the envelope of refuge. And this will be greatly aided by formally going for refuge through actually generating the minds of fear and faith, turning to the three jewels for refuge, honoring them through offerings and making supplications. So by starting one's activities in this way, both formal Dharma practice as well as one's general activities, then one will be actually one will actually be engaging in Dharma practice rather than merely doing good deeds. So in this way, one will accumulate vast stores of merit and thereby easily accomplish all one's spiritual goals.
제산다 내래 섬로를 십소라이 마다나야 즉 됐어. 다 겸르게 직겸르 제세 야가르나 델라도 두그래서 소수게다 질야가도 나침부 삼다 베네가 주신의 주에 삼다 직겸르 겸르 제신의 주 검제는 된디디 검제도 신의 주마도데 아우다 신의 주투하면데 난 겸르시나 겸르 제제 두신의 최는 자와 제외나 델라도 두그래서디 다다 참민도와 너를 다다민도와 델라도 두면서 다데네야 가르스페시나라 가르손스는 최딩의 자와 가르치는 겸로지 소와 됐나 된다야 남성 주구리랍도와 그래서 당연히 너를 가르는 용구에서는 되는 겸로지 겸로 소와 뜻는 신의 주에서 신의 검제 신의 주마도는 다 겸로지는 신의 최딩의 자와는 델라 주에서 된다 주마송아 신의 주마송 그래서 당연히 자주스 인지기에 된다를 겸로지 되는 게 인지 공부한다 인지기에만 당연히 인지기에 주마송 세상 겸로지는 최근 자와가나 델라도 주그레세야디 다다 차음네 주마송아 되는 게 인지 공부 인지 게마 겸로지 인지 공부 인지 게마송에 된다 주마송 겸로 검증의 신의 주마 된다 주마송 세상 겸로지 소와 답시 제베네 델라도 된다 델라도 주그레세야디 대다다리면도 선배기다 되는 용구로 와서 되네게
When we read here, just in brief, whatever Dharma activity you engage in, if you start with refuge, it will easily be accomplished. So there's a possible scope for misunderstanding here, in fact, for some negativity. Let's say one sets out on striving to accomplish calm abiding, and one goes to refuge, engages in a session to attain calm abiding, and does so continuously over a sustained period, but doesn't achieve calm abiding in the end. One may then say, oh, going for refuge really didn't help. It's not that I didn't easily achieve calm abiding, I didn't at all. Or likewise, if one engages in regular and sustained meditation on compassion and bodhicitta, but despite one's endeavors and always starting with refuge, one doesn't end up as a bodhisattva, then one may think, what is the point of going for refuge? Nothing was attained, let alone easily accomplished.
드네 자단 온도시네 저게 내내시나 어디에 점르지메제 가면도 된다 주야 가면도 선배다 점르게다 지게 한 로야게 되게 내가요. 점르지메제 가면도 된다 된주고 숨어도 된다 주마서 근데 점르지나 판도 가면도 선배게 삼는데 점르 소수기게 딱 점르게 매바 차이게 내가요 시우로.
It is possible that when one's dharmic goals are not easily or quickly attained, one can end up blaming the three jewels. This, of course, would be a mistaken way to think.
디 자와디야 donda디야 춘춘이 맞들이야 말와다 지 겸르들라 소수기 뉴바 갈리 강좀 체부 주연은 디지기 뉴바 체르다 겸르 빼마세 첨보 주나 디지기 뉴바 체르도야디 당은 주 용거로 봐 제가 디네자 지사다 겸르 제바 잠기 남사 된다 죽투그래서네 갈래 하보러와 지사데 내가 소수기 겸르 띵부 지배지 부이다고 야고지 같이 제베나 디시 개와의 슈셔르나 가지고 된다 주의되기 미유디 아니 교화 죽투야 용거로 진짜 디체는 송거로 마도 아직 겸르 제바 잠기 아니 지게 남사디 된다 죽투그래서야 돼 송마로 배낭아주 대시 시에바나지 예 겸르 지네 아니 개와 치망아서 개와 팔게야 돼봐 다르지네 개율이 개와래서야 돼 얘네게 겸르 제바 잠기 남사한테 되면 겸르도 슈첨버 주고 와다 얘네게 겸르 베지 셴베 ngānsu kōwa dēnīgē tēlē tārdōgē sāmbā shūk chābō dēlē shūk chābō kēnē dēnī yā kōnchō sōmli yā pē sēm dēngē yā nē gyabsū chōbīgē gyamdō nē gyamdō labjā lā dōngā yēchē tūmē tsūrūm sōyāgē dēnīgē sāmbā shūk chāmbō lē yāndō shūk chābō lē yādō ngāndē kō gyawā tē shūk chāmbō sātō kō rō bā dī nāshī dā ngānsu jōgē gyawā chāwā kārdōbē nē sūsūgē gyamdō tē yādā sūsūgē shūk chēchōng nūpa chēchōng bākbēgē dīgī tuwa nē dā ngānsu 야고 겸도 야고 부이다고 누가 친구 야고 제토가 있나 수수기 개변 냠는 해야 되게 레라고 교보로지 용토 될라도선 레라고 교보지 용토 그래서 그러다 줍토 그래서 해야 돼 된다는 차대로
Rather, the realistic understanding is that the consciousness that is refuge is a consciousness that has a tremendous variety in terms of its strength. The stronger this consciousness of refuge is, the greater its impact on one's virtuous practice. Moreover, the consciousness of refuge is one essential cause among several essential causes that are required to bring about a desired virtuous result. So if we think of the illustration of the God who saw through their clairvoyance, or with clarity, that their next rebirth was about to be as a pig. One can appreciate from that predicament that the refuge generated by this God would have been sincere from the very depths of their heart. So therefore, when refuge is like that, when it really comes from deep within, it is a very strong, powerful consciousness, and therefore the propelling impact it has on one's virtuous activity is far greater than something that amounts to little more than a mere recitation of words.
델라 타르도게 삼로 슈크자가 시리고와 델라 타르도게 삼로 슈크자가 가지게 베나 디셈게는 델라 교비 뉴바도 콘주스로 요레 세베다 콘주스로 야 겹수 주비게 교구레 세베 이치도 슈크체리고와 세상 코알야 예중에 삼바디 베 충충지마도 메나 델라 타르도게 삼바디야 충충지마도 메레 델라 주메도 델라 겹수 주비 겸로데야 델라 충충지마도 리게 뉴발마 충충지마도 리게 말아 지금 내년 인상은 즉 this 제니게 삼르기 숙체중의 개발 도구로 받아. 제가 겸로 숙체 누가 체중 맞춰서야 돼.
The mind of refuge itself comes about independence on two causes. And independence on the strength of both of those causes, the resulting mind of refuge will reflect that strength. So if one merely understands that there are such things as lower realms, and in theory I may well be born there, that first cause for refuge is certainly weak. And likewise, if one's understanding of the qualities of the three jewels is also merely academic, that cause too, that second cause, will be weak. But on the other hand, if one has a deep understanding of the sufferings of the lower realms and a recognition that on my continuum abide the causes for rebirth there, this is a real possibility for me. And this leads to a deep fear arising. That deep fear will spur one to think deeply about the qualities of the three jewels, which itself will give rise to that second cause for refuge, that of a deep trust in the capacity of the three jewels to guide one and gain freedom from suffering. So therefore, the quality of the causes leads to the quality of the result. That is the case in the mind of refuge. It's the case with all virtuous qualities we look to accumulate. The strength of the causes leads to the strength of the results.
Ani kesa le ngandro de dendro ni le ma de ki mare dendro le ke na nyawa ida dendro sum ma ki ro di ke wa ne ka ma dende yore se dini she ya du di ne se de thon ne ta ngan ju ke lam sa o ta tele de ma tha ne ke wa chi ma de le ke sam pe sa sa de ye le de ma ke wa jin ji mi ji che go du sem be ke ta de le thar du ke sam ba le ya ke da sung go ba de tham de ke sam ba le de ta de le ma ke wa de kan se ho re kan se thar de le thar go du was ta de le ke be ni ba su yore se ne 다 상계 권조 상점내 권조 숨나 요레스 지산다 점내 권조 숨나 요바자다 점내 권조 텐데 교위 누바 교그리 셈비게 이실해야 돼 지사대 나중에 권조 숨나 접수주의 점로디 슈첨보지 레다 누버침보 영향이 된다라 녀를 양아주게 지원미다 봉고 주셔야다 나서도 뭐 주셔야도 김산디로와 지산 디디기 예수의 교인디 예마토나 데라 탈되게 삼바도 슈침볼이 두고 말와
This becomes clear when we think of the general context of where we are in this text, in the Lamrim presentation. Prior to looking at the chapter on refuge, we looked at the chapter on the potential rebirth in the lower realms. And prior to that, we looked at the chapter on the impermanence of this life. So therefore, the meditations one would have been engaging in are reflecting on the certainty of our death and the uncertainty of the time of our death. Recognizing that this precious opportunity I've attained, it is finite, and its end could be at any time. None of us can say with any certainty as to whether we will die tomorrow or even today. Moreover, the experiences of the lower realms are something I've had to endure in the past. Those causes abide on my continuum, and I may well be born there again. To the extent that one has reflected well on those two causes, one will have given rise to a wish to gain liberation from potentially being reborn in the lower realms. That strength of mind will lead to us engaging far more deeply in this chapter, looking at the qualities of the three jewels, really assessing for ourselves whether they have the capacity to guide us to gain liberation from rebirth in the lower realms. So it's for this reason that the text is presented in this order, but also so that when you start your meditation, we always start with refuge and bodhicitta, but prior to even reciting refuge verses, generate the mind of refuge by reflecting on suffering and the qualities of the three jewels, so that when one actually comes to recite the refuge formula, the mind of refuge is present. Then one is really going for refuge to the three jewels.
레다 뉴모 코와레 키친제 동아이 자신레샤 동아들레 마턴데 탑미도 타고 심전 탐제 동아다 자도 샘비게 닝제를 삼다 닝제고 네게 삼마까지 슈첨보 나게 긴이다 델레규베 뉴바디다 심전 탐제 코웨 동아 타들레 규베 뉴바디 콘조 수로 열선 gemne 콘조 수로 열에 gemne 콘조 교그레 샘비게다 이시템보 쳐야 돼 가지고 gem로 쳐야 돼 차고 gem로 다 네게 이시템보 쳐야 돼 접수 줘야 돼 저 데니기 디 고미야 돼 데니 곰네다 데니기 이시 템보 첸다 점주기 랍잘 할라비야디 다지산 상기기 랍자 가르송으로서는 제자다 류가 이중에 제도면 추름송 고그레스 랍자 추름송 고그레스 추름송 마송바이나 네 추름송바이나 디기에는 개와치마 먼저 고바 톱톱을 추름송 고그레스다 and it in the Surim Soya. Chizanda, Shanley, Nusichio Mare, said, so this Labja. In Nelaya, Dush in the Shanlia, and the Kasan Shuba Nashi, Shan Simjala, Pendo to Shanlia, and then Jamrikialia, Gavasaya, Bichina, Penbe to Gure, said, to Soya the Yed out, Lucian and Yamlinchi at the Charigur. Then in Nizam, Donala, Jamrosia, Dushine, Korean Asona. Sim Nasung Dungati, Samata, Delete, Tarwood Maton, Tabinu, Sempe, some Tarbe Tarwa, Dele Tarwood, Sempe, some time, Dele Jubian, but give no conscious from your, she's a give no conscious Juguri, Sempe Ishisha, that give no conscious Juguri, Ishisha, and Zada, Jopang and Juguri, and San Yigi, Yamneji, Lamdun, Shabating, as with Lalan Tago, or watch it, Chesan did that Jimbat, Surim Soyada, Jimbatawa, the Seva Yam, that is so Chagor, Chesan Dinigi, Lungagi, Jeva. 냐 기위기 자와 조투야 되게 베지시야 되 자고레스 데네 제바나 데네게 가지고 선은 바도메 바사기레스 데네게 냠네 제바나 디게 가서 깨와래 기르고 마게 깨왔지만 먼저고 뭐 도투그레 사실 언도 숨거로와
A further addition to the meditation prior to going to for refuge is having reflected on the suffering of the lower realms, one can reflect briefly also on the suffering of the higher realms and then remind yourself, it's not only me who wants to be freed of suffering. It's not only me who is experiencing problems and difficulties in this life, but every other suffering being is too. And wherever one is born in cyclic existence, we are propelled there without any free will, without any choice, whether we are born in the greatly pleasurable states of the God realms or as a human or in the lower realms. We are sent there under the control of our karma. And even when we attain better rebirths, such as the remarkable one we've achieved now, we know suffering still follows us. Suffering is still repeatedly experienced. And this then gives rise to a deeper sense of liberation, a wish for liberation from suffering, the sufferings of samsara in its entirety, and through recognizing that others also yearn for a state freed of suffering, we generate the determination to go for refuge so as to spiritually develop for the sake of ourselves and others. This then spurs us to reflect on the qualities of the three jewels. Then, gaining confidence that the three jewels can guide us to gain actual protecting refuge from suffering, our desire then to accumulate virtue will be very strong. And with this mind, we then go for refuge. In this way, we are reciting refuge with the wish to accumulate virtue so that we don't fall into the lower realms, that we create the causes to continue to spiritually develop, and we can be of benefit to others. So in this way, right at the start of our practice, we establish the correct motivation. And this will also give rise to a yearning to engage in the 6 practices of generosity and ethics and patience and joyous perseverance, concentration and wisdom. We will want to engage in them because understanding these are the virtuous practices that accumulate causes that will lead not only to ongoing excellent rebirths, but our own spiritual progression and our growing capacity to be of benefit to others. This then too gives us a confidence that I am creating the causes that are leading me to gain freedom from suffering, because I am accumulating merit through these meditations, in particular when one also feels the effect of these meditations in one's daily life. This adds to one's confidence, adds to one's conviction that one is on the right path, that one is transforming one's mind. Then I must apologize. I need to conclude early today. Tomorrow we have the consecration of the Kadampa Stupa, and so a few Geshis are arriving shortly, and I need to welcome them and so forth. So I'm afraid I need to end a little bit early this week.